Thank you so much, Martin. And I want to thank the AfriThrive community for inviting me back. I am so excited to be here. So, we're going to talk about something that I think is very important. And I think I'm going to take you on a little journey today. We're going to talk about nutrition. We're going to talk about culturally familial meals, but we're also going to talk about diabetes, pre-diabetes, and preventing diabetes. The most important thing that I want you all to know is that remember, our culture is part of our health. It's not something that we should have someone else take away from us. And we're going to figure out how to weave that into our care, how to weave that so that we can prevent diabetes. So, why does this matter? Well, diabetes is very common. We have a very high percentage of diabetes in the United States. Many people are at risk. I always tell people, my family, diabetes kind of runs rampant. So everyone has to be aware that it can happen. And we know that food plays a major role, as well as other lifestyle things. So when we're talking about diabetes, what comes to mind? High blood sugar, all these things you've heard about, insulin, the symptoms, testing your blood sugar. These are all the things we think about when we think about diabetes. And I have to say, sometimes we get really nervous about it and we get kind of scared about it. Oh no, I don't want to go to the doctor. So, what we find is that diabetes, let me tell you what it is. It means that insulin cannot circulate through our body, and insulin is not getting to the glucose that's circulating in our body to actually bring it to where it needs to go for energy. So why do we always hear about our weight as a factor with diabetes? Unfortunately, as our weight climbs, then our body fat increases, and then the insulin can't circulate through our fat cells, and the pancreas is working so hard to keep cranking out insulin because it doesn't think that it's making any insulin. So the importance of our body weight, we should always, this is a tough, tough topic. Nobody likes to talk about their weight. The dietitian doesn't like to talk about her weight. But we do need to know that healthy weight to prevent diabetes is what we should be striving for. Nobody has to be a size 4, but we just need to be at that level that it doesn't increase our blood sugars. So let's talk a little bit. What's prediabetes? So you go to the doctor and you get your blood drawn, and they do a fasting blood sugar. Hopefully, you always go and make sure that it's fasting, and you see a higher than normal blood sugar. But it's not in that super high range, it's just in that borderline range. Or you have something what's called a hemoglobin A1C. What that is, it's an actual, think of it as an average blood sugar for 3 months. A lot of times with prediabetes, we don't have any symptoms. And if we could catch it, then any symptoms we do have can be reversed. So we always want to manage blood sugars. That's the whole idea of if we have diabetes, if we have pre-diabetes, we want to be looking at down the road blood sugars and making sure that our blood sugars are within control. If you have type 2 diabetes, then I would strongly recommend that you get one of these new CGMs, and they actually will monitor your blood sugar throughout the day. Why is it great? Because then you see when you eat certain foods how your blood sugar reacts. So if I eat my favorite pasta, if you all joined me last time, you know that's one of my favorite foods. Then I could see, does that really increase my blood sugar? And if it doesn't, then guess what? I don't have to worry, right? So much. I want to control my portion, but it's not one of those foods that got to be on the list that I say, that food increases my blood sugar, and as a result, I have to lower it or I have to pair up something else with it. So your target should always be 80 to 130 is a perfect target for blood sugar. And the what I said before, the hemoglobin A1C measures what your blood sugar is for 3 months. Here I say it is best if it's between 7 and 8. I'm going to make I'm going to make a change to this slide, and I'm going to say really under 7 now. So, what are some of the symptoms of low blood sugar? I don't know if any of you ever feel like, oh, my blood sugar is low. Well, what does it feel like? You feel shaky, you got a fast heartbeat, sometimes you're sweating, you have blurry vision, you're hungry, you're anxious, you might be a little irritable. Those are all the things that give you a sign that maybe your blood sugar is low. Blood sugars, especially for people who have type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, low blood sugars could be just as bad as high blood sugars. That means you're not eating regularly, maybe. So, what's a high blood sugars? So, high blood sugars can be very dangerous because you could develop ketones, and ketones can actually put you into a diabetic ketoacidosis, kind of a very fancy name for ketones building up in your blood and can actually affect you so much that you can end up in a coma. So we don't want high blood sugars. We don't want to put our head in the sand and say, I don't have to worry. My blood sugar isn't too high. I always wonder what that means, too high. So what are some of the symptoms of high blood sugars? You might be chuckling and saying, but Lucille, these are almost the same thing as you showed us for low blood sugar. And sure enough, that's why it is sometimes hard to know. Oh, my computer's has a mind of its own today. So it's important to know, wait a second, did you do you test your blood sugar to see if it's high or low? So now you could see some of the effects of high blood sugars. It could increase your risk of stroke. It could hurt your heart. It could also affect your eyes. There are so many reasons why high blood sugars are really bad, but it does damage your blood vessels and it does damage your nerves. So high blood sugars destroy all those little nerves in your hands and your feet. And in your eyes. That's why you hear people saying they have retinopathy or neuropathy. Those are terms for nerve damage in your eye or your feet. Oh, I'm sorry for this slide. It got a little squished up. The important point is that you need to take your medications as prescribed. Your medication, nobody else's medication. You need to set an alarm to help you remember. I will tell you, even I have a hard time sometimes. Did I take my blood pressure medicine? Yeah, even the dietitian has a little high blood pressure. So, what do? You try to do something to really make sure that you remember to take it and to take it about the same time. And again, if you do have diabetes, you must test your blood sugar. It's really important maybe to use those CGMs so you could see what that blood sugar looks like throughout the day. If you have prediabetes, make sure you see your doctor and get that fasting blood sugar every 3 months and that hemoglobin A1C every 3 months. So, if you have prediabetes or diabetes, since we're talking about nutrition and food and healthy eating, what foods really influence your blood sugar? And so, do we have to take away all the foods that we love? So if you kind of look at this, you see some foods on the left, some grains, some fish, and then on the right, we all recognize those foods. that everybody seems to love, right? No matter your background sometimes, that pizza, hot dogs, hamburgers, things like that. I think you all know, you can figure out what is going to have a bad effect on your blood sugar. So why does food affect your blood sugar? Well, we're going to talk about that. There are certain foods that are digested in a certain way that increases the amount of glucose in your bloodstream and sends those blood sugars up. But do you have to get rid of all the foods that you love? Have you been told to avoid foods? What have you heard? I'm going to tell you some of the crazy things I hear. I hear people say, well, my doctor told me don't eat anything white. Okay, that makes me a little crazy. So what does that mean? Eggs are white, rice is white. Does that mean you can never eat that? No, that it should not be. Those kind of things shouldn't be. And then, of course, since we all eat, everybody wants to tell us what to eat. Your neighbor, your mother, your grandmother, everyone. So let's really kind of put it in perspective. First of all, the big concern that everyone asks me when they come to visit us in the office, are you going to take away my food? Do I have to give up my special cultural foods? No, that's part of your identity. They can protect your health. We just have to know how to balance the things we eat. And of course, there are going to be some things that you might have to make adjustments. You might have to make little adjustments in how you cook, which is fine. So you don't have to give up your foods. We really have to think about balance more. So food and blood sugar, let's kind of make it very easy. Carbohydrate has the greatest effect on your blood sugar, the greatest effect. Protein and fiber slow down how much glucose is released from food into the bloodstream. So protein and fiber do not raise the blood sugar as quickly as carbohydrate. So that's kind of good to know. So let's kind of figure out, well, if that's true, if protein and fiber don't raise my blood sugar so high, how can I plan my meals to maybe focus more on that? So let's talk about the Nutrition 101, the basics. Many of you remember this from last time, and I think it's important to go over it again. So let's first start with protein. What does protein do? It helps us grow if for children. It helps us to repair tissue, build muscle, even if we're older. One of the biggest problems we're seeing with GLP-1s, the weight loss drugs, are people are losing muscle mass, and that's really bad for that to happen. We all want to get rid of our body fat, but we don't want to use muscle mass. So remember, you need a minimum amount of protein. The average man, about 56 grams. The average woman, about 46 grams. A little bit more than that is fine. Now, if you have triple that amount of protein, you really don't need it. And there is some suggestion that very excessive amounts of protein could affect your kidneys. So we want to be careful. So remember, the building blocks of protein are amino acids. Amino acids are all these little blocks that when they are all together, we have a complete protein. So like I've always liked to say, our ancestors are kind of smarter than us. Why? They used to put rice and beans together, or they put pasta and beans. Why? Because neither of those items have all the amino acids. But when we put them together, we get a complete protein. That's called complementing protein. So all those amino acids have to be present. Guess what? The body can't make amino acids. So that's important. We need to get it from our food. So again, this is how much we should be having, just as a little reminder. Okay, carbohydrate. Now, I said carbohydrate has the greatest effect on our blood sugar. But what kind of carbohydrate? Well, the carbohydrates seen in this picture, which is really great looking, right? There's beans and there's chickpeas and there's whole wheat pasta and all those kind of things. Well, we don't worry about them so much. Why? Because as we said before, fiber is good. If the carbohydrate has a high amount of fiber, it's going to be digested slowly. If it's digested slowly, it's not raising your blood sugar high and quickly and high. So we have to figure out which of those carbohydrates that you need. So carbohydrate is not the enemy. So if we're going to have rice, or we're going to have plantains or yams or fruit or other starchy vegetables, sweet potatoes, lentils, and it goes on and on. Whole grain bread or whole grain pasta or brown rice. Those are all the really good carbohydrates that are high in fiber. Your body needs carbohydrate. We can't not have carbohydrate because carbohydrate does break down into glycogen, which gets stored in your muscles for energy. So we really do need that carbohydrate. But what raises blood sugar? Well, this is interesting. If you have very large portions of carbohydrate, if you have very large portions of carbohydrate that have no fiber, if you have the carbohydrate alone. So if you're only having, a bowl of rice or a pasta, then what's happening? You don't have any protein. If you don't have any fiber in it, if it's not whole grain pasta or brown rice, that's going to raise your blood sugar. So we're going to have to put something else with it. And of course, sugary drinks raise your blood sugar. There's no way around it. And I don't care if it's fresh squeezed orange juice, juices are very high in sugar. Think about it. If you're making fresh squeezed orange juice, first of all, you squeeze it. Maybe you're not putting the fiber in. The important part is that pulp, the fiber. Or maybe you're taking 3 or 4 oranges to squeeze it to get 1 cup. Then that's the equivalent of eating 3 oranges. Far too much carbohydrate. That is definitely going to raise your blood sugar. So, what helps to control that blood sugar? Fiber, protein, and the vegetables. That's because they're high in fiber. So, let's look at the fiber. Whole grains such as quinoa, barley, bulgur, oats, brown rice, farro. There's a ton of them here. And then, of course, legumes. We want to make sure that, any of the dried beans are really great. They're very high in fiber. Anything that's a really good source of fiber, it has to be at least 2.5 grams or more is considered a good source. An excellent source is 5 grams per serving. So remember, we want good sources of dietary fiber. We want to make sure we have them at each meal because it's going to slow down the digestion of the carbohydrate. So, other things that are high in fiber, fruits and vegetables. Do remember though, fruit tends to be higher in carbohydrate than vegetables because, kind of think of it this way. It's to me really kind of common sense. The sweeter the fruit, the higher amount of carbohydrate. So, in South Florida here, I I think that mango season we see so many people with high blood sugars. Why? They have mango trees in their backyard and they love mangoes and they eat lots of mangoes. And guess what? They're very high in carbohydrate, they're very high in sugar, and they do increase the blood sugar. So does that mean they shouldn't be eating fruit? No, they should, but control the portion size. And like I said, the sweeter the fruit, maybe the smaller the portion size. And don't forget about nuts. I didn't mention them before. Great source of fiber. They're a good source of good fat, and some have a little bit of protein. So starchy vegetables are like corn, squash, sweet potatoes. Those are all really very good too. So sugar is the part of the carbohydrate that is not good. That's what increases your blood sugar. So there's two kinds of sugar. There's the sugar that's contained naturally, like in milk or fruit. We don't worry about that. Moderation. But then there is fruit that gets, excuse me, there is sugar that gets added to our food. And that's what we really are concerned about. So that's like soda, sweets, baked goods. And the other thing I like to say to people is remember, honey is high in sugar. Just because the bees made it doesn't make it better. So any kind of sugar, if it's honey, if it's syrup, any of those things are going to be very high in simple carbohydrate that really raises your blood sugar. Sugar substitutes are fine. They're not broken down by the body. Do I think they're healthy for you? Not at all. But some people feel like, well, I need something a little bit sweet in my coffee or my tea or something like that. So the new ones are, are good in that we don't see very much aftertaste. And those are like stevia and monk fruit. It doesn't raise your blood sugar. So, your key message for carbohydrate, if you have high blood sugars or if you have prediabetes, try to consume about 130 grams of carbohydrate a day. So, you might say to me, how do I figure that out, Lucille? Well, it's kind of easy now because you can Google the carbohydrate content of foods. But I think if you just keep it to 1 to 2 servings of a carbohydrate per meal that is high in fiber, you'd get there easily enough. You can count carbohydrate, like I said before. You could look at different, look it up. You could use food trackers, MyFitnessPal, things like that. They even have they have apps and food trackers for individual with diabetes. So that might be something that you want to use. Now, what do I mean by glycemic index? The glycemic index is kind of what I was saying before, how certain foods are digested and how they affect the blood sugar. So, foods that are digested slowly do not bring up the blood sugars high. Foods that are digested quickly bring up the blood sugar very high. You know how this is easily illustrated? You know, when people have low blood sugars, they say, drink orange juice really quick. Why? Because the sugar in that is going to increase your blood sugar quickly. So again, I think I've made a really good point that high fiber foods are the ones that have a lower glycemic index. So let's talk about fat now. Why do we need fat? Well, we do need it because there are certain vitamins that are absorbed in the presence of fat. Vitamin A, D, E, and K. That's really important. And then there are essential fatty acids that are found in food that are great in brain development for infants and children and possibly in adults combating dementia. So, fat is kind of an essential component of our cells. So, the good kind of fats, which we talked about last time, think of it this way: fats that come from a plant source are great. So that could be olive oil, avocado oil, corn oil, safflower oil. Okay. So now this is where there's a lot of controversy. Oh, and fish. You know, fish is a really good source of fat. Well, there's a lot of controversy because I'm sure you've heard about the dietary guidelines, and they're talking about the dietary guidelines and how maybe there's saturated fat like beef tallow that would be okay for you. Well, I think that the scientific community is not all agreeing on this. So I think a prudent approach at this point in time is maybe not eat so much saturated fat. Don't use butter so much. Trim your meat. There's nothing going to be wrong with doing that. And then when different scientific evidence comes out, we could, kind of regroup. Think of it this way, because people say, well, why is it today you told me this tastes this is good for me, and next week you tell me it's not. Because nutrition is an ever-changing science, like a lot of other areas in science. So I want to show you what I think is the diabetes plate. It doesn't matter to me what you put on the plate. It is what is going to have the best glycemic control. So half your plate should be vegetables, whatever kind of vegetables. You like cabbage, cauliflower, greens, whatever you like. You put that on that half of the plate. And then that other half of the plate we divided in half and we put one section protein and one section our high fiber carbohydrate. So here's some things that you could look at and maybe you'd say, "Okay, I see how this needs to look." Maybe you want to use some of your vegetables like I've illustrated here. And then maybe the protein could be chicken or fish, or maybe you want the protein to be beans or lentils, and that's great. And then that carbohydrate, rice, plantains, yam, corn, whatever you want to add. Keep your cultural foods. That's what I like to say. Just balance it. You don't need to give up the food you enjoy. Adjust the portions and the combination. And if anyone tells you you need to give up the food you enjoy, I don't I don't really think that they're I don't think that you're going to really feel like you're being helped well with that. So this is another illustration of a plate. Doesn't that look great? So we have greens here. We have collard greens. We have a sweet potato. We have a chicken. And then we have yellow squash. So you can put as much vegetables on there and you could prepare them any way. You know, I always kind of smile because we all have spices that we really love to use. And guess what? The spices are not going to affect your blood sugar. Use all of your traditional spices that you like. That's important. What's the only thing that we have to be careful of? All of us is how much salt we eat. That is something we need to be careful of. Not for the diabetes, but for the high blood pressure, right? And it's not the best for us. So, what about beverages? And this is a tough one because I know a lot of people like to drink soda and they say, "How about diet soda?" I hate that too. You know, I am a bit of a nerdy dietitian. I say, don't drink soda. If you have to have something, how about unsweetened tea? How about herbal teas? Those are really great. You could have a little coffee, nothing wrong with that. Really large cups of coffee have been shown in some people to increase their blood sugars. That's again what we're learning with those CGMs I'm telling you about, the continuous glucose monitoring devices. Maybe you've seen them on friends or people, you know, just in general. It looks like a little round circle and they have it on their arm. It's really interesting because it's telling us foods that we never thought affect the blood sugar in some people it is being affected. So remember, traditional foods are powerful. I like to say, you know, food is culture. We know that. It's family. It gives us memory of our past, makes us feel good, and it's health. But what you know what I really like to say? Food is a way we share our culture and we embrace others. And that's such a great feeling, isn't it? So, portion sizes, not getting rid of foods, just make sure that we are looking at portion sizes. So sometimes we're not so set on what our portion size. We don't really understand what a portion is. So sometimes you could use your hand if you don't have anything, you know, else that you don't have any measuring cups. It's always good to kind of measure out. You do the plate method, that really helps. But some of these little things will tell you, like, you know, your thumb is an ounce of meat, a cup could be like, you know, a fist. The palm of your hand could be about 3 to 4 ounces of protein. If you do have diabetes or pre-diabetes, then it's good to have a meal plan. And a dietitian can help you with a meal plan. It's good to have so you stay on track. Planning helps you stay on track. I think last time we went over how to read a food label, but it's still very important and it's very confusing. When it comes to diabetes and pre-diabetes, we're zooming in on the carbohydrate and we're zooming in on the fiber. So remember, this product here has 30 grams of carbohydrate for a serving. A serving is 3 pieces. The fiber is 3 grams. That's about 10% of the carbohydrate. Not bad. We want as much fiber as we can. Remember the key things to look for when you are reading a food label. What is the serving size? I could eat the whole bag and say, oh, I just ate 3 servings. No, we don't want to do that. We want 1 serving. So we want to know what the serving size is. When we identify what the serving size is, then the rest of this is what that serving size has in terms of calories, protein, carbohydrate, fiber. We're looking for high fiber foods. So if if you're eating 3 pieces of something, you're getting 30 grams. But again, going back to if you ate 6 pieces, that's 2 servings, you're going to get 60 grams. And that's not what we want. So remember the rules for the supermarket. I think I kind of told you that last time. Oh, and by the way, somebody asked a really great question last time about predatory pricing in the supermarket. And I had never heard of that. I had never heard of supermarkets changing prices, throughout the day. But I'm very glad that you told me about it. And then I looked into it and I did see that Maryland legislators uh, actually put a bill against doing that. So that's not going to happen. And I think that many consumers, once they hear of that, will really boycott those kind of supermarkets, right? So I don't think that's going to go. So rules for shopping, never go on an empty stomach, right? You're hungry, everything looks good. Go to the outer areas, the produce section, the meat, fish sections. Try to avoid some of those inside aisles. Since I love potato chips and I really have to practice what I preach, I kind of envision the potato chip aisle has crime scene tape on it. So I don't go into that potato chip aisle. So cooking, I always say cook it if you could save money and eat better when you cook. Simple recipes. If you do have diabetes or pre-diabetes and you want some recipes, go to diabetesfoodhub.org. That's a great place for recipes. Or, just use that again, that food plate. So that helps you. Try to swap out some things so if something's deep fried, not the best. Maybe you could saute it. Maybe you could roast things in the oven. There's ways that you could develop simple techniques that help you swap some things. Now, of course, if it's a holiday and you're making your favorite meal, right? Maybe you don't want to change that. Everybody will get upset if you're changing that favorite recipe. But it's always okay to make little changes normally. If you go out to eat, have a couple of rules and try to stick to it. Drink plenty of water before you go to the restaurant. I always like to say if you have a really long wait, have a little snack because you don't want to be so hungry. And by the time you sit down, you're like, oh, I can't help but eat. I have to eat. Especially if you have diabetes or pre-diabetes, your blood sugars might be low. Buffets never keep you on track. I don't care if you start at the the beginning, the middle. Every time you put a little bit on your plate is bigger and bigger. So try to stay away from buffets. I mean, I know that those restaurants won't like that I'm saying that. You could always review the menu before you go too, so you could see, what are some healthier options. And can you bring it home or can you share it? Some people don't like to bring things home. Now, alcohol, I got to tell you, alcohol wreaks havoc on your blood sugars. No other way to say it. I know people drink different things. They might drink sweet drinks. They might drink hard liquor, they might drink wine. Any which way, it affects your blood sugar. So always eat when you drink. That's the only thing the dietitian can say about that. So meal planning, make it easy. You always want to have a high fiber carbohydrate. Have a protein source. Remember, protein slows down the digestion of the carbohydrate. Have unlimited vegetables and then add your fruit. You could always plan ahead, prep, plan your menu for the week. Sometimes that's helpful. And then there's great recipes on this Diabetes Food Hub. I think you would really enjoy it. Just go to that website. I think it's pretty amazing. They have all different kinds of recipes, all different cultural recipes too. So fun to try some other things, maybe some familiar recipes for you, just changed around a little bit, made a little bit more healthy. Simple rules. Don't eat carbohydrate alone. Watch your portions, add the vegetable. And then lifestyle matters. We know this. Walk, go to the gym, manage your stress. I laugh at that because we all have stress, right? And it's really hard to manage it sometimes. But you have to find something that makes you like calm down. If it's 5, 10 minutes of just closing out the world. And sleep is so important. It really is. Again, something that's difficult. But we know food is medicine, right? Daily habits matter, and small changes do add up. So, what's really good? We want to get back to basics, get that vegetables, fruit, lean protein, animal or plant. If you're a vegetarian, that's fine. Whole grains and small amounts of fat. Remember, you are in control. There's no need for perfection, but consistency is definitely key. I always like to say there's no magic formula, but education using evidence-based nutritional is key. Closing, keep your culture, keep your favorite foods, improve your health, prevent diabetes, know your numbers, know if you are at risk for prediabetes and diabetes. Getting tested and identifying if you have prediabetes is really going to help you, and it will help prevent that full onslaught of diabetes. So you want to have some SMART goals. So what's SMART goals? You have to write down, what do you want to accomplish? I want to know what my blood sugar is, and I want to track my blood sugar every 3 months. You're going to say, how are you going to do this? And how are you going to make it happen? Be realistic and be time specific. I always tell people, they come to see us and they say, my doctor wanted me to go on medicine. I don't want to go on medicine. I want to do it myself. Okay, so what are the goals? What are the goals in relation to nutrition? What are the goals in relation to lifestyle? And then how much time are you going to give yourself? Because if you're going to just keep going and going and going and thinking, well, okay, I don't want to go on medication, but 6 months later, you still haven't made any progress, that's not good. That's not good for you. So you have to have a deadline. Now, in case you really do have prediabetes and you'd like to be enrolled in a program, it would be really great if you join the diabetes prevention program. Bethesda Nutrition and Wellness Solutions has it, and that is part of Wholesome Village. So they have virtual classes, and it's often nationwide and it's free. And you have registered dietitians that can really help you and help manage if you have type 2 diabetes, or provide education to prevent you from having full blown diabetes. So that is my presentation today. I thank you for your attention, and I think we have a little time for questions.
Thank you so much, Lucille, for that highly, highly informative webinar. You are correct that we do have at least 15 minutes
Great.
for any questions from the audience. So, if you'd like to ask a question, I believe you should be able to post it in the chat. Or if you raise your hand, I think I have the ability to unmute so that you can speak. So feel free, whichever method you prefer, and then feel free to ask your question for Lucille.
Martin, I either answered everybody's thoughts about diabetes and pre-diabetes and nutrition, or they're being shy.
I I think you did a very thorough presentation. Um, and yeah, listening to it, I think I, for one, learned a lot from this particular presentation, especially in terms of how the kinds of foods that are fast digesting and how those can be, very troublesome, for helping to manage your blood sugar. Um, so I think for me, that's very insightful because I've kind of always wondered, okay, why is it that some people can say, okay, you can have this kind of carb, but this kind you should watch, or, these kind of fruits are okay, versus these ones that you need to watch out for. So I think that's super, super informative to know.
Good.
Yeah. So I'm not seeing questions come in, so I'm going to assume that you all were able to have all of the information that you needed based on this presentation. Again, feel free to reach out either to myself directly. We have our information in the Zoom invite that you can send in questions, and we can always bring Lucille back to cover them in any future webinars, of course. And we will be uploading the recording for those who weren't able to make it, as well as if any individuals had to step away and miss certain portions of it. So you'll be able to go back and listen. So, with that being said, I think we can wrap things up. Again, Lucille, appreciate your time and effort in
My
putting
pleasure.
together this thoughtful presentation. And everyone who joined, I appreciate you all taking the time to come in and listen. And we will be back again soon next month with our next nutrition related topic. So, thank you,
Thank
Lucille.
you
And
again. Thank you again for inviting me. I really appreciate it and enjoy speaking to you.
awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.